Lewis here from Seriously Series, and in 2019 we're going to be kicking things off with a bang. That's right, we're starting an all brand new playlist on our YouTube channel, and if you haven't subscribed you better click on that button now, because what we're going to be looking at is a playlist called Unique 4x4, and this is going to be looking at unique vehicles that have been used in an off-road application. And we're going to be starting this playlist with episode 1, looking at this 1994 Land Rover Defender 110.
The new Land Rover 110, better than ever.
Damon here from Seriously Series. I'm going to show you my Land Rover Defender here. So some of you might not know who I am, but I'm usually behind the camera. So I do all the social media side of things, so Facebook, Instagram, I upload YouTube, I edit all the videos, and I'm usually found behind the scenes. So bear with me if I blabber on. So this is my 1994 Land Rover Defender 110, and it's got a 300 TDI in it. So I first bought it maybe in 2013 off of a local Land Rover mechanic here. So this car was actually written off. It got run off the road by a bus and hit a tree, and the whole front end was completely shagged. So a bloke called Paul there did it up, and I bought it off of him for $5,000 Australian. So the reason I the reason I wanted a Land Rover was because I'd previously been in the Australian Army for quite some time and really liked the Parentes. So the 110 Parentes, and they had the 6-wheeled ones and the FFR variants and whatnot, but I just liked the simplicity and the reliability of those particular cars. So I thought I'd get one when I get back to Tassie from the mainland, and I've got myself this 110. And it was an interesting first few months with it. I had a lot of trouble because I had no idea about anything about cars. I was just learning on the fly, as you do with owning a Land Rover. You learn to become a mechanic, and it's all self-taught, and that's what all the forums and all YouTube's for. It's great. It's all pretty smooth sailing, and Justin Cooper was helping out a lot, so that really helped out with the maintenance and keeping on top of it. But it had a the first trip I took it on had a leaking injector pump. So the Bosch VE pump was leaking out of the spindle, the throttle spindle, and it was going everywhere. It was coming out quite fast, and I just ignored it and filled it up and kept going, which is quite silly, but that's what you do when you're young and silly. And I took it on a trip to Freycinet, and we went beach driving and got stuck for the first time, which was funny. It was up on 2 wheels and had terrible tyres and had no traction, but we eventually got out, and there was a Land Rover Discovery there, and that got out first go. I won't talk about that, but moving on. So what have I done to this car? Probably one of the first mods I did was the tyres. So I put two 55/85 R16s on it and the Maxxis Bighorn, and I also put those tyres on Discovery steel rims, the Disco 1 ones. So they're very tough compared to your alloy wheels, and these have taken a big beating. There's a few dents and whatnot in the rim there. And the next thing I probably did after that was actually put new Defender 130 front springs in, and that was to level the ride out. So the 110 tends to lean forward a bit to compensate for the load if you're towing or anything. So put that in because I was never going to tow for a long time, only here and there to go to the tip or something. So that leveled it out, made it look pretty sweet. And after that, because it all came with it all had this, the snorkel was already on it, and the side step was actually already on it. This was actually what they call a brush bar side step, so it would have come up over here and connected to the previous bull bar. But because it was written off, the bull bar was all buggered up and had to be taken off. But they kept the side steps, which was nice. Now you're probably wondering why, if you've seen it, it says TD5 there. It's not a TD5, it's actually a 300 TDI 2.5 litre turbo diesel under the bonnet. So the reason it's got the guards, and it's green, not blue, is because I actually had a bit of a prang with it. No one else was involved. It was just bad luck, I suppose. I was going around a roundabout in the semi-damp conditions, and there must have been an oil spill on the road, and because I had those real bad tyres on it still, come around going down a slope, and it just went out sideways, and I just went sideways and had a big prang with the inner rails of the roundabout. So that was close to where Justin Cooper was, and luckily enough he had a green one. And even better, the other side's also green from the previous write-off it had, and they replaced that with a green one, so it actually evens out and looks quite nice. Apart from that side, quite dented. But they're all stories to tell. So the next thing I did was probably put the ARB bull bar on it, and they're heavy things, very heavy. But living in Tasmania, Australia, there's plenty of wildlife on the road, and I tend to drive at night now and then, and didn't want to do any more panel damage. Not that the wallabies and kangaroos here are quite small, so they only get around that high, or maybe that high if you're lucky. So there's no worries there, and I also put a bash plate underneath to protect all the steering dampener and all the steering arms under there. And other than that, it's been pretty good. Have been doing a lot of trips in it for work, for just camping trips, getting away, doing photography trips, and it hasn't really let me down at all. I think there was one time when I was driving through peak hour traffic in Hobart, and the slave cylinder in the clutch was leaking and I didn't know about it, and sure enough that completely depleted in the reservoir, and was riding the car through first gear through all kinds of terrible traffic. Not that there's any traffic jams in Hobart, but still peak hour. It was annoying driving first gear with hazard lights on through all the traffic lights, and eventually gave up and tried to bleed it myself, but it was just two shots, so got a tow truck, which was sad, and then got it sent to the local mechanics just to put a new one on, and off away it went. Okay, so this is the 300 TDI, and it has been rebuilt a couple times, I believe, because the whole body itself has done over 600,000 Ks. Originally it was from Cairns, so for some reason I think there's about 3 previous owners. I only know the history a little bit, but whoever had it in Cairns wasn't putting the correct amount of coolant or no coolant into the water system of the engine, and what has actually happened, the lime that's in the water up that way has actually started eating at that alloy head, because he's got an alloy head and a cast block, and unfortunately for me, I was the one that discovered this the hard way and needed to replace the entire head because it was completely eaten out by this limey water that was just obviously happening over time and time. So, brand new head on it, and it runs like an absolute dream now. I haven't really done much to the engine. I haven't even tweaked the fuel pump to get a bit more power out of it, just because I've had so much trouble with the previous fuel pump leaking. I didn't want to touch it because they're an expensive unit if you want to buy them brand new. So yeah, just keep it maintained, regular oil changes on this, and keeping all the levels up, and regular checks every week when driving it. And I did I actually had a big problem with getting to the P gasket. So the P gasket is what connects the water pump housing to the block. So it's a water inlet, and it's only a small gasket, but there was leakage coming from it when it was getting hot, and the actual car was overheating and many overheating issues. And eventually, because I changed the radiator, I changed the viscous fan and thermostat twice, and went through all that, and ended up just finding that out. And what someone had done, the same story, the alloy was corroding, and someone just bodged it up with some Sikaflex, and it just wasn't going to work, so it was leaking and overheating anyway. So in that process of getting the housing off, the water pump housing off, I actually smashed my middle finger quite bad, and it just split open like a bratwurst when you overcook your sausages, and it didn't look nice, and it really hurt. Well, it didn't hurt because it was completely numb. So there's a bit of nerve damage done in there. Yes, our landies do hurt us, but after that, a few stitches later, and I think it was probably 2 days after that accident, I actually come back in here and got the housing off and put a new P gasket in, the tin one, which is a bit more reliable than the original one, and then actually put the new water pump on as well, and new gasket and new belts and everything. And I regularly change the belts, and because if you go in the water they tend to get a bit squeaky and stretch. So the heater box is new, it's really good. The core's really good for the cold winters in Tassie. No aircon, as you can probably see over there. Not really needed in Tasmania. We do get hot days, like for example today is meant to be 37, 38 degrees centigrade. So it's pretty hot, but I'm doing this in the morning, so it's quite comfortable right now. Now, what am I going to do with this in the future? Probably nothing. It works. I'll keep it that way. Just maintain it, keep it going, and just regular maintenance. So we'll move on inside. Right, so I know what you're thinking. What is going on here? Well, it's a short story. There's rust. Yes. How unusual in a Land Rover. So, it was a couple of weekends ago, I decided to clean the floor pan out, take the mats out, and I had a bit of a closer look, and there was some tape on the footwell that was painted blue that I hadn't recognised before. And I peeled it off, started to peel it off, and lo and behold, there was a hole. There was the ground. I could see the grass through the footwell. And I continued, and for some reason I wasn't surprised, which isn't a bad thing, but just more work for future reference, because there's rust everywhere in the footwell. Not too bad, like I've seen a lot worse, but someone's just bodged it up and taped it over and thought it'd be alright just to leave it. And what I decided to do then is just rip the entire dash out, because I didn't know how bad it was going to be. So I wanted to make sure that the rest of the firewall was sound, but I actually found a little bit more rust where the water's been sitting, and it's actually good timing, I suppose you could say, because if I left it the way it is now, I would have put a foot through the footwell, I reckon. So what normally is here is just your standard Defender dash, and there was just a little head unit there with an aux cord, and that's it. Not that you can hear the music or anything in a Defender. You just turn it up full ball and that's good enough. But it's alright, it's fine listening to the engine and the turbo, it's quite nice. So this was my daily driver, and it was my daily for since 2012, because I got rid of my Hilux and got this instead. And recently I've just taken it off the road just to do work on it and get it up to scratch for things like this. And the doors are pretty bad as well, so it's got all that rust, and not electrolysis, but the rust you get between the metals, the aluminium and the steel, and with water oxidising it, and it's all a bit of a mess. So I'm going to take the door cards off and look at that, and stuck into that. The interior though is pretty stock standard, haven't done anything. There's two switches here that I've put in the cubby box that operate the light bars on the top, which I'll show you a shot of. And you probably noticed this isn't standard for a Defender, because this is the handbrake in my Defender. Usually they're down here, but in this one we've put it here, so this is out of a disco and it fits in there nicely, out of the way, your leg doesn't hit it, and you don't have to lean down so far. You can just sit there and put the handbrake on. This gear knob, I don't know who put that there, but I've just kept it. I'm not much for fancy stuff, just keep it all standard, works. There's nothing really else to show you. I'll show you the back, what I've done. Recently put the back seats back in, usually they were never in, so I'll go show you that now. So this is the boot. All I've done really is just put some marine carpet in here, because the original aluminium was pretty beaten up and dented, so just covered it up, and it's easier to clean out now. You just get the vacuum in there, or you can even just hose it out if you want. So yeah, as I said, I usually have the back seats out, but I recently put them back in because I use this car a lot for filming. So when I film documentaries and whatnot in Tassie, I would just load this up, and I had just some plywood across here with some carpet on it again with dividers, and it would extend the whole way to the cubby box at the front, and I would sometimes even sleep on top. Well, I would regularly sleep on top, put the swag on top and all the camera gear underneath and on the roof rack. So the advantage of having a Defender and filming documentaries in Tasmania, Australia in general, is because there's just so much room. You just need to chuck it in and off you go. You go up any track, and you know, because usually you rent cars and you can't technically go off-road if it's a four-wheel drive and all this and that. But with this car, because I live here and because the Tasmania doco that I did recently here for David Attenborough was 8 months straight of just filming, and a lot of it was local, but there was a lot of driving also, so going to the northwest, the west coast, east coast, onto Mariah Island and all over the joint. We did a lot of filming, and I would tend to go off by myself because I was one of the only permanent residents here, so I was filling all the gaps, if you like to say, because it was quite a big crew, and they all would come and go from the UK or the mainland, and I'll be here and they would ask me to go, oh, can you go film this, can you go film that? And this car was just set up, so all I would have to do is just chuck the Pelican case in with the red and then just go off. And I would have the slider track on top, and if I needed someone to help, I would call my mate up the road, and he would sometimes come with me, sometimes I'd go by myself, and I'd make a trip out of it. And this car was perfect for it, and because it's a diesel, you can go a lot further than a petrol car, and it was just reliable, and I could sleep in it and camp and go up. And the thing I did really like about it is I could go up pretty well any track, just exploring, to get that little bit closer to where I needed to film, because it's really hard to lug all the gear by yourself, because the cameras we use are a lot bigger than what we use for YouTube, and the lenses and everything, the tripod, the camera, the body of the camera, the lenses, and all the other bits. So if I was using the track slider, it would take me ages to set up and get there, and I would just want to drive pretty well exactly where I wanted to film half the time. But sometimes that didn't happen, I have to carry it anyway. But it always got me where I needed to go. And yeah, so what am I going to do now? Because, well, it's looking pretty sad. This car is pretty sad. The interior is, because it's sitting and it's a lot of moisture around here, and the interior is actually getting a little bit mouldy up the top. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. Here's the light bars up here that I was talking about before. The switch is inside, so I've got I think it's 24 inch in the middle, and I've got 2 7s on the outside that operate on a swivel. So you can see at the moment they're pointing outwards, and that's just to point out to the side of the roads when you're driving down remote-ish dirt roads. All roads in Tasmania are pretty renowned for having a lot of wildlife on them, so it's good sometimes just to see them before they come onto the road, and this would be very handy when driving at night on the mainland, which I don't recommend doing because the kangaroos there are a lot bigger and will write cars off. So they're great. They're just eBay specials, and then you just got the ARB roof rack up there, and that's designed for a 130. Now, I don't really like the look of it, but it's all I could get at the moment, and it works well. I would much prefer a full length one, but I really don't put that much up there. All I've put up there is swags and the camera rails, as I was talking about before. And you can also see, this is the dented side with battle scars, and you can also see on the bottom doors there, the rear door in fact has got that alloy rust coming through, aluminium rust, and I'm going to tackle that one day. It's a big job to take the cards off. That might be salvageable, but like there's stuff like this where it's actually stretched already. That was from the ride-off, and that door was saved, thankfully enough. And the door cars to replace them, it's quite a fiddly job, and I'll probably want the steel ones as a replacement, not the aluminium ones, because I've heard stories of the aluminium ones being a little bit too flimsy, like the original ones, which are flimsy, because if you put any dent in them, it's real easy actually to put a dent in them, but it's hard to get them out because it stretches. The steel ones will be more solid, and you can get in there and put more preventatives for the rust and whatnot. So that's the next thing, and it's going to be a project, I suppose. So it's off the road. I'm driving another car. It's sadly not a Land Rover, but it's good to have a car that you can just drive and drive and drive, and it's a Japanese car, so I'll show you a picture of it. And yeah, so this is the next project for me, I suppose, among the Series 3, the Yellow Mustard Series 3. That's an ongoing project, always something to do on that. But I want to set this up maybe a semi-tourer, because I'm not really into lots of mud running, full driving, big ruts and mud everywhere, and those days are over, I think. I've become a little bit more sensible and realised that you can do wheel bearings, and I've got a name for doing wheel bearings and the like, so that's another story. So I want to do it up, so I'll probably put some 235/85s, R16 on here, not the 255s. These are about 33.2 inches, brand new, but they're probably worn down a bit now, so I'll put some smaller tyres on it, which will improve the turning circle by a little bit, and then fix all the little niggly things, put it all back together. Lots of rust preventatives, and I reckon I'll put a full-length roof rack on it. So if you want me to actually film that progress, like, it's not going to be like an every weekend kind of thing, it's going to be a very slow, but if you want me to document it, just let us know, and I can even just do it when I can and show you all the little things, and especially mechanical things, because I know this engine quite well now, and all the little things that I need to do and replace, and I'll do all that, so it's a very strong engine. And same with the drivetrain, I'll do all that as well, because there's a few leaks and whatnot coming out of the gearbox and shaft gearboxes and oil seals and whatnot, so I'll need to do all that. And being a 300 TDI, it's quite a popular Defender now, opposed to the TD5, which is even more popular actually. So, but the 300 is probably, in my mind, one of the more reliable engines. Not that the looks changed at all with any of the Defenders, but this one's your classic, and it's in the middle, and it's the one that everyone remembers and everyone likes. So, and yeah, so if you want that to happen, let me know and I'll start documenting. Okay, so thanks for watching me ramble on about this Defender. If you want me to do the Series 3, the Mustard 109, let me know and I can do that one as well. But I'm sure you've seen plenty of that one. So yeah, thanks for watching.